Hey, what's going on, guys? In this project, or this series, I should say, we're going to be building a responsive portfolio website from the ground up. Okay, so this is a little different than most of my series. Most of my series, we build some kind of small application using a framework or something like that. We're going to build this just HTML5, CSS3. We're going to use Sass, which is a CSS pre-compiler, and a little bit of vanilla JavaScript. So no frameworks, no Bootstrap, nothing like that. And even if you're a beginner, if you're just starting HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I still encourage you to go through this series and code along with me. And I think you're going to learn a lot because we're going to use things like NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, to install Node Sass, which is our Sass compiler. And even if you have no clue what Sass is, still watch it, and I'm going to explain things step by step. I want this to be beginner friendly as well as fun for intermediate web developers. All right, so let's take a look at the actual project before we do anything. So it's very minimalistic, as you can see. The home page has a background image, it has an overlay, and then we just have the name, a slogan, and some social media icons. Okay, so the coolest thing about this website is the menu. Now this button is pure CSS, and if I click it, you'll see it just rotates into an X and back. We're going to do that with CSS3 transitions and the transform property. And then we have this overlay with the image on this side and the menu on this side. And the menu kind of floats in from the right too, as you can see. And then the About page is very simple, and we're actually going to use grid CSS here. We're going to use grid template areas, so you'll learn a little bit about that. And if we look at the My Work page, again, grid CSS here. This is going to be responsive as well, which I'll show you in a second. And then the contact page is very simple. We're actually going to use Flex here. I wanted to switch it up a little bit. And we have these little hover effects using CSS transitions. All right, so let's take a look at the responsiveness. So if we go down to about here, that's probably like around the size of a mobile device. And you can see everything is centered, looks nice. And if we click on the menu, it's now in a vertical fashion rather than horizontal. So this is completely responsive as well. If we go to the About page, everything is nice and stacked and neat. If we go to the My Work, everything is stacked. Same thing with the contact. All right, and if we go to the My Work page, notice that they're all in basically one one project per row. If I go a little bigger, it turns into 2, a little bigger to 3, and the biggest is going to be 4. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the project. It's not a huge website, but there's actually a lot that goes into it, especially when we get into like the Sass and the transitions and stuff like that. So you're going to learn a lot. Now let's take a look at the structure real quick, just so you can kind of get an idea of what we're doing. So I have Node Sass running down here, which is just compiling any Sass that we create. All of our Sass goes into the SCSS folder. As you can see here, we have some partials. We have a config file where we can change the colors, and we can change if we want to not show the image. We can say false, and you can see the image goes away. We can change the opacity. If we change that to 0.5, now the image is more prominent. If we want to change the colors, we'll change the primary to white. Now notice the text is white right now because it's on a darker, the primary color was dark. If I change the primary color to a light color, and then let's change this to, I don't know, blue or something. Oops. Yeah, and then save. Now the text is dark because we're actually going to create a Sass mixin that will make the text dark if it's on a light background and light if it's on a dark background. And we can look around the site now, and you can see all the primary and secondary color changes. So it still looks pretty good. So you can use any color scheme you want. But I'm going to go back to the dark gray and the yellow. And if you guys want to use this as your actual portfolio, that's fine. I mean, this is completely open source. The only thing I ask is that you don't sell it. You can use it in any other way that you want. All right, now in the dist folder is basically what you would deploy to your host. We have the compiled CSS, and then our HTML, JavaScript, and any images. Okay, so that's the dist folder, and that's pretty much it. The rest of this stuff is just your package.json. We'll create our Sass script here. So it's not going to be too difficult, but it is like a modernized project. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. All right, so in this video, what we're going to do, aside from this introduction, is we're going to set up our workflow. So we want to install Node Sass. We want to set it up so that when we create any Sass in our CSS folder here, it gets compiled into our dist folder. So we just want to set up a workflow and structure, and then we'll move to actually start, writing our HTML and stuff like that. All right, so let's get started. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the finished project open in case we need it for reference. So I'm going to leave that in this tab. Now, there's a couple things you're going to need for this project. Obviously, you need a text editor, and if you have something that you've been using, that's fine. But what I would recommend is VS Code or Visual Studio Code. It's incredibly intuitive and fast and easy to use. It has great extensions, and it's definitely the best text editor that I've ever used, and it's very, very popular in the web dev community. It's completely open source, so if you're on Windows, Mac, Linux, doesn't matter. So that's what I'll be using. I'll also be using a couple extensions, so if you want to follow along to a T, then I would definitely recommend it. You're also going to need Node.js installed, and Node.js is a JavaScript runtime, but the reason we're installing it is because it comes with something called NPM or Node Package Manager, and the compile tool that we're using for Sass is called Node Sass, and we need NPM to install it. So that's the reason that you're going to need this. And I know a lot of you guys probably already have it installed, but go ahead and download it, install it. You can use the latest version, that's what I usually grab, or you can use the long-term support version, whatever you want is fine. And then lastly, I would recommend that you have Git, which is version control. You should have this on your system anyway. And if you're using Windows, this comes with a nice command line tool or terminal tool called Git Bash, which gives you some Unix tools, and it's really nice. And whenever I use Windows, I use Git Bash. So you might want to install that as well. All right, so, and we're going to be using Git a little bit in this course or in this series. So let's go ahead and close these up. I already have all the stuff installed. I just wanted to kind of show you. So let's open up VS Code in a new project. So first of all, I'm going to create a new project folder. Now I'm going to use the terminal here, and if you're brand new to this stuff, don't let the terminal scare you. It's not bad. We're not doing anything advanced. Just go ahead and open it up, and let's create a new directory to work in. So mkdir for make directory, and I'm going to call this modern _ portfolio, and then we're going to cd, so change directory into modern _ portfolio. And from here, I want to open up my Visual Studio text editor, or Visual Studio Code, I should say. So to do that, I can say code and then dot, which represents the current folder. Now, this may not work for you. If it doesn't, then you can open up VS Code and just go to your command palette, which I believe is Shift Command P, and then type in shell. And then right here, you can see it says install code command in path. So if you click that, you'll get this little success message down here, and then you should be able to use that code command. But you don't need to use the terminal to open a folder. You can simply click on open file over here and then open your folder. It doesn't matter. All right, so now what we'll do is create some of our, actually before we do that, I want to go over my extensions in VS Code that I'll be using. So first off, we have live server, which allows us to open our HTML on a dev server that has auto load, so I won't have to keep reloading the page. Highly recommended for any kind of just like static website development. I'm also using bracket pair colorizer, which is completely optional, but I like it because it matches colors of brackets and curly braces and parentheses so that you don't get lost if you have like a lot of nested if statements and stuff like that. And this will also work in Sass as well as JavaScript, but you don't need it, but something that I use. And then prettier is a code formatter, so it'll format HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and I have it so that when I save my file, it automatically formats. Now it won't do that by default. If you want that to happen, if you want it to format your code on save like I do, then you have to go to settings in VS Code. So you can do control comma or command comma, or just go to the little gear and then settings. And let me close this up. And then the setting that you're going to need is this right here. Where is it? editor.format on save. That needs to be set to true. So what you would do is just search for editor.format, and it'll pop up on the left side over here. So right here, format on save. Just click this, click true, and then it'll get put over here. And then you just want to save it with Control S or Command S. Okay, that's really the only setting that you need to kind of do what I'm doing here. All right, so if you are using VS Code, I would suggest those extensions and that setting, and you should be pretty much identical to my environment. All right, now first thing I want to create is my dist folder. So I'm going to create a new folder called dist. And like I said, this is where all of our HTML goes, all of our compiled CSS, our JavaScript, our images, stuff like that. So I'm just going to create an index.html file in here. And I'm going to be using Emmet, which comes with Visual Studio Code, and it just makes for quick HTML. Like if you want to do a class on an H1, you could do h1.test tab, gives you a class of test. If I wanted to do like an ID of hello, I could say hash hello tab gives me an ID. And if you want a div, you don't even have to write div. You can just do like hash test tab, and it gives you a div with the ID of test. Now you can create a boilerplate, an HTML boilerplate with exclamation and then tab, and it gives you your head body tags, it gives you your viewport meta tag for responsiveness, so it's really handy. And in our title, I'm just going to say welcome to my portfolio. And in the body for now, let's just put an H1 and we'll just say hello. So let's save this. Now you can open this up by just going to your file system and opening up the HTML file, but I'm going to use Live Server. So you can right click or control click, and you can go to open with Live Server, and then it will open in your browser. Okay, and this is auto refresh or auto reload. If I were to, let's make this a little smaller here. If I were to, let's like add an exclamation and then save, right away it's going to reload. So it's very, very handy. So now what I want to do is create a folder outside of my dist called SCSS, okay? Because we want to start to work on our Sass workflow. So in here will be our Sass files. So I'm going to create a file called main.scss. Okay, this will be our main Sass file. Any other files we create will be partials that we basically import into this file. Now, we need a way, like I said, for our Sass to get compiled down to regular CSS because the browser doesn't read SCSS files. So for that, we're using something called Node Sass. So this is the GitHub page, and it uses libsass, which is the C version of the preprocessor, and it's very, very fast. So that's another reason I really like it. Now, in order to install Node Sass, we need to use NPM, as you can see right here. So before we actually install Node Sass, we need to create something called a package.json file, which is basically like a manifest for our project. And to do that, we can do it with npm init. Now you can go to your standard terminal like this, or you can open up the VS Code integrated terminal, which is what I'm going to do. You can go to View, Integrated Terminal, or you can just do Control or Command backtick, and you can toggle it. All right, so let's run npm init, and it's just going to ask us some questions. Package name, that's good. Version, good. Description, let's say responsive portfolio website, that's fine. Everything else is fine. If you want to put your name here, you can do that, and I'll give it an MIT license and enter. So that's going to create this file here, package.json, which is just that, a JSON file with some key value pairs, and it holds some information. If we install anything with npm, it'll get put in this file inside a dependencies object. So let's go ahead and let's clear this up and do npm install or I, and then node-sass. Okay, and that's going to install it. What it's going to do is create a node modules folder up here. Anytime you install something with npm, it gets put in the node modules. Now notice we have a ton of files in here. That's because Node Sass itself has its own dependencies, and then some of those dependencies have dependencies, and all that stuff is in here. So you don't have to worry about this. You never have to go in this folder and touch anything. It's also not going to get deployed to your server, so it just kind of sits there. All right, now we have Node Sass installed, so the next thing we need to do is set it up so that it works. Now to do this, we use something called an NPM script, and you can see we have this scripts object, and it has this test. What I'm going to do is change this test to Sass. I'm just going to call it Sass. We could call it anything. And this is just echoing something out, so I'm going to just get rid of this double ampersand exit 1 and just change this right here to say hello from, we'll say hello from Sass script, I guess, doesn't matter, and save. And now down here, to clear this out, we can do Control L. And to run an NPM script, we do NPM run and then the name of the script, and we called it Sass. So let's do that, and you can see we get hello from Sass script. So obviously this isn't what we wanted to do. I was just giving you an example of and showing you how to run it. So let's take out everything in between the double quotes, and we want this to run the Node Sass program, so Node Sass. Then we're going to add the -w flag, which means watch. Okay, so we want to watch the SCSS folder, which we just created. And we want to set an output, so -o. We want to output the compiled Sass to dist/CSS, like that. And then we just want to add the -- recursive flag, so recursive, because if we don't do this, we're going to have some issues with partials and having it auto reload. So that's it. Okay, very simple. So just to reiterate, Node Sass is going to watch this file. It's going to compile all of our Sass into regular CSS and put it in this file. And we don't even have to create the CSS file in the dist. It'll do it on its own. So let's save this. And let's go down here and let's run it. So NPM run Sass. Okay, and it's going to do this. It's just going to kind of just stop, and it's just watching the SCSS folder. So now what we'll do is go into our main file, and let's write a little bit of Sass. So I'm going to create a variable. So to create a variable, we use a money sign, and we're going to call this primary-color. Use a colon here to assign it to, let's say, $444, which is a dark gray. And then I'm going to just put in a body tag, and for in the body I'm going to say background, and let's set that to the primary color. Now once I save, watch what happens. So we're going to get a green message down here saying that it rendered complete. And now if we look in our dist folder, we now have a CSS folder. If we look in there, we have a main.css. So it basically took the Sass file, compiled it into regular CSS, and put it here. And if we look at that file, this is what's in it, just a body with the background of gray. Okay, now you don't want to touch this. You don't want to touch your regular CSS file. That's the compiled CSS. You want to work within your SCSS. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing. Now, if we go back to our project here, you'll see there's no gray background. The reason for that is in our index.html, we didn't include any CSS. So what we want to include is the compiled version. So we want to go into CSS and then main.css. So let's put a link tag here, and let's say in CSS/main.css and save, and now you can see we have the gray background. So whenever we add anything to our Sass, it'll auto update. So let's make the color, we'll say color white, and save, and there we go. So it's gonna just auto reload. So this is a nice little workflow, having Node Sass and live server for VS Code, because you can just update your Sass, it gets compiled, and then it auto reloads in the browser. All right, so what I'm going to do now, since we have basically have our workflow set up, is I'm going to open a new terminal. So I want to keep this running. I'm going to click the plus sign, a new terminal. I'm just going to create a Git repository. But before I do that, I'm going to just create a file called gitignore or .gitignore. So let's say touch, and the touch command just creates a file. So we'll say touch.gitignore. I spell that right? Gitignore. And you can see that right here, gitignore. I'm going to just click on that and go inside of it and just put in node_modules, because we don't want that to be added to our repository. That's just our dependencies. So let's go ahead and just save that file and close it. And then let's initialize a Git repository. So we'll say git init. And that what that does is it just creates a hidden folder called .git, and all of our repository stuff goes in there. So I want to add everything that we've done so far. So we'll say git add dot. So add all. And then let's make a commit to the repository. Right now it's just in the staging area. Now I do have a Git crash course on my channel if you want to watch that if you're interested. But we're just going to do git commit. We want to put a -m flag so that we can just put a comment in here, and we'll just say initial workflow setup, like that, and then it gets committed. Okay, we're not going to push it to GitHub or anything right now. It's just local. Okay, so that's it. Let's go back to our other terminal where our node Sass is running, because you want this to run down here, because if you have an error, like let's remove the money sign and save, and you'll see Sass will actually give us an error and tell us where it is and what's wrong. So let's put that back. All right. Okay, so I think that that's going to do it for this video now that we have everything set up. So in the next video, we're going to start to add our markup to our index HTML. And then we'll start to work on our CSS. We'll create the menu button and all that stuff. So I will see you in the next video.